Now, Telkom has recently announced that it has sold its towers business, Swiftnet, for almost 7 billion rand. This deal has left the Telkom CEO, Serame Taukobong, optimistic, emphasizing the fair value of the transaction. Joining me now to unpack the metrics of the deal in greater detail is technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza. Mudiwa, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, Telkom has been trying to offload this business for some time now, I think since about 2020, 2021. What has the overall sentiment been like? Are markets responding positively to the move?
Well, good afternoon, Taoleng. It's been an interesting one to watch. And we pointedly asked Serame last week to say, was this a fair price? And the reason we asked that is because when the idea was first floated about listing Swiftnet, because back in, it should be 2020, former CEO Sipho Maseko, he did calculations and he said the value of our individual businesses is not reflected inside Telkom's share price. So we want to do these separations, maybe list some of the businesses, realize some value for shareholders. And at the time, the value that they had on the Swiftnet business was 13 billion. So they had made plans. They were going to go and list the business at the beginning of 2022. But unfortunately, market conditions, they struggled in terms of market conditions. At that time, we got indication that they scrapped the listing of Swiftnet with about just below 10 billion rand valuation. So it means they expected 13 and it was coming down underneath 10, just under 10, and they decided let's scrap the whole thing. Now you come, into the market and you're selling it at 6.75. So we had to ask the question, is this fair?
Yeah.
And, for the most part, Serame said, you know what, 13, to quote him directly, he said, 13 billion was many moons ago. And then he went on to say that the market conditions are different now. And it's true, valuations have fallen off a cliff for a lot of businesses out there. And, things hadn't just come back. And there had been some pressure for Telkom to actually, go through with this, because now that they're done with this piece, we're now going to be looking at the next businesses to say, okay, fine, we've done the Swiftnet, there's other parts of the business as well.
So I guess that loss was just generally on the back of the deterioration that we've been seeing in markets.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the crux of this transaction. What does the structure look like? Take us through those mechanics, who's buying it and when it's expected to be finalized.
So, finalization, the indication that we got from Serame team is they're expecting everything to be done within the next 8 to 12 months because you've got your customary closing conditions that need to happen, competition commission, all of those things that need to happen, until everything is done and dusted. As you can imagine, this is a business that's running about 4,000 towers, for Telkom, and now they're going to be selling it off. They've got what's called a sale and leaseback agreement.
Okay.
Where basically Swiftnet is a Telkom company, and that's the unit of Telkom that was running its towers, right? Its mast and towers. So now they've sold it off to a consortium, and as part of the deal, they've arranged for themselves to lease back those same towers. So Telkom doesn't move. It's just the ownership of the towers that changes, yes. And now, whether or not people see it as a risk or not is another issue, but you now introduce a new operating expense into your operation, onto your balance sheet, because you now are paying, these lease costs for the towers that you used to own once upon a time, right? Obviously, that's offset by the fact that you've received a whole chunk of money now, but a lot of that is going to go to debt. So I'd say those, some of the key things. Ownership is changing. They've got a leaseback agreement. And then I think the last thing to highlight is in the structure of the deal, you've got a company called Actis, which is an infrastructure investor. They've gone in, into a deal, together with the Royal Bafokeng Holdings. And to my understanding, 70% is owned by Actis, and then the 30% is owned by Royal Bafokeng. That's the consortium, that has taken this on. Just out of interest, Actis we announced this deal was announced on Friday.
Yes.
Yesterday was Monday. Actis, the same party, sold a fiber company called Octotel, which is probably the biggest fiber company in the Western Cape. So it seems they bought into this and sold
out to that.
Of that. Yeah.
You know, I wanted to talk about Actis. Let's just bring it in before I let you go. The last thing I read was Actis having investments in another towers company. Right, so are they basically on like a shopping spree? What's going on?
As far as I can tell, if I was a portfolio manager, I would probably use the words portfolio optimization, you know, because they are an infrastructure investor, and telecoms infrastructure is something that they've been investing in. What I found interesting on that, you know, the little swap that I just mentioned to you, if we're going to call it a swap, is that you're buying into masts and towers, you're selling out of fiber, right? And this is at a time when so many people are trying to get into fiber. Yeah. So I just found that to be a very, you know, interesting dynamic, because in this environment you would expect, you know, some of these players to be holding on, you know, to some of the fiber assets, right? So I'm very keen, you know, to actually talk to some of the people behind the scenes, some of the bankers, especially the investment bankers, to say what was the rationale, you know, for something like this. Because to make something like this happen, you've probably gone to funders. The two biggest in the market right now is Standard Bank and R7bn. They're the ones that are doing a lot of the infrastructure funding. So between the two of them, one of them likely funded this deal to say, guys, how did you guys advise something like this? Yes, it's masts and towers. We see it, but at the same time, they're exiting the fiber business. So it is an interesting dynamic to note.
Mudiwa, we always run out of time when we talk to you. Do you know what?
Yeah.
It'd be lovely to catch up with you again to see how that story in particular develops. Thanks so much for your time and those insights. That was technology correspondent for Business Day, Mudiwa Gavaza.